All right, we're live. Welcome everyone to Tabletalk, where we talk all things tabletop. I'm your host, the Bella Gamer, with my co-host Glue Boy.
Hello.
I think I actually need to move my camera. I had to center frame last time because someone wasn't here.
I
There you
was
go.
busy.
I'm so shocked that despite how much you've gotten sick, we've not had to bring out the Nurgle counter once yet. Despite that,
Technically, it's still 0, and that's what
it's still
matters.
0. Yeah. Hi, man. How you doing? Uh, but yeah, if you're coming to one of these podcasts for the first time, we usually get to the main topic somewhere in the 25-minute range. So go ahead and jump to there if you're watching this post the fact. But we always tend to start off with a little bit of small talk while we're waiting for people to hop in. So Alex, what's been going on?
Well, mainly been recovering my throat because I can finally, like, now-ish use it a lot better. But primarily, the main thing of note that I've done, I put out a weird video today, dude. A very weird
Yeah, I
one.
saw that. It looked like you had a lot of fun with a lot of the editing stuff in it.
I did. I had a weird idea of like it was like a joke idea I had with my friend that helps me record of like what if I made a video that's like cuz I have my series for those that don't know on my channel Glue Boy, my 40k lore stuff. I have a series, a recruitment lore channel of like, all right, you can get recruited to all these factions. How does it actually work? How like from recruitment to like career path, let me answer all these questions a lot more focused of like a lore overview. And so I was like, okay, what's a faction that you can't in any way get recruited to? The Tyranids.
Yeah.
So like the joke initially was just like it's literally a 30-second video of me just saying go outside and get eaten. And then I was like, nah, that's really short, kind of low effort. Like the joke is just kind of one and done. And so I expanded it a lot more because I had the concept at work of like, what if it's like a malicious lore video?
Yeah.
And then I built on it more and more and more. And like, I created that of like, if I'm going to make a short video, I want to put some effort into it. And so I made something weird. I think it's kind of fun. Also messing around with like some concepts that's like 40k analog horror kind of. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a good time. I'm happy that people in my audience seem to be fucking with it. It is very fun. Um, but yeah, I'm happy with how it turned out. Also, it was because when I was gonna go record, my throat didn't want to work. So I was
Mm.
like, if I'm gonna do something, I gotta do something short. So like me on screen is a minute. Like it was nice and easy.
Yeah,
It was
my
fun.
this week has not been great for content creation for me personally. Did my video the other day about the dagger heart stuff. I tried recording with my phone for the first time and it went terribly. The video is kind of garbage just because it's not even for anything like actually done in the video as much as just the phone seems to have like uh the mic seems to be positional. So sometimes the audio channels are like super on the right mic or super on the right, headphone or whatever,
Mhm.
very quiet on the left. And sometimes it's so bad that it causes a split. So my voice kind of like trembles a bit when you listen to it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to fix that. There's probably some setting I probably could fix, but that audio wise was terrible. The video is fine, but no one clicked on it. It's probably just bad thumbnail, honestly. But or people just are now just completely done with Daggerheart. Maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Who knows? The
Uh
Daggerheart, like it definitely seems like Daggerheart did not have as big of a carrying weight than Candle Obscura. Because even the people like I saw
yeah.
with like even the harshest stuff was just people being like, I'm not even gonna dignify this with a review because it does nothing interesting. I was like, that
Which is
I mean, that seems
so
like annoying
incorrect.
critique.
Yeah.
That just seems annoying.
There's so many people who are just like, I would get into this, but I don't like the no initiative thing because people just can't comprehend not using initiative. And
Yeah, I don't like that either. I don't like the idea of just being like I understand you as a person being like, I don't like this rule thing. I've done it before. It didn't work out great. I'm not a fan of
Mm.
the a lot of people who are like, it is up to the rule designer to come up with rules because there hypothetically could be a situation where one of my friends is an asshole,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is such like I don't like that.
Well, and the thing about Daggerheart, and I think the missed opportunity. I like conceptually the idea behind Daggerheart. I like the idea
I
of
think so
this.
too.
It's this half step up from Rules Light, where it's like it's Rules Light for a lot of things, and even the combat is kind of Rules Lighty. It just has a little bit of extra depth to it that gives it a little bit more. Because even damage resolution, you don't really have to do a whole bunch. Rules mid. I mean, I think that's a surprisingly good way to put it,
Yeah.
because honestly, I feel like they missed the market that they should have been going for with it. I feel
Hmm.
like I like Daggerheart conceptually, like I said. I think it's very interesting, and I don't think it's a bad game at all. I think the biggest problem with Daggerheart is Daggerheart needs players buy-in to make a story right, like any rules like game. Yes, but that's I think well, okay, so what I'm talking about is uh I feel like they should have just made a slightly less dense, more open-faced D&D, in the fact that like I like what they kind of were doing, but I feel like they should have added just more rules and not made it half rules light, half not. And not even like in the way that Lancer does. Like they should have just given rules for like the skills and everything and made it a lot more simple than D&D, a lot more just like not as many rule discrepancies as you might come across, to make it, because I feel like the majority of their audience is looking for a game that runs better than D&D, that has a lot of the same trappings of D&D. And I feel
Hmm.
like their combat system plays a bit into that. But honestly, if they had just went with an initiative system, or they went with the Lancer initiative system where it alternates and the players get to decide who acts next, uh, would have worked better. And then just rather than having the open skills, like what are your experiences, essentially, just have actual skills. I feel like if they had taken those steps to just kind of to add just a little bit more depth to it in general, it would have hit the market that I think Critical Role applies to more, which is people who really really like the idea of D&D but aren't so like into it so that they need to like have a game super in depth around it, and made it something that's just easier. Because unfortunately, as much as Critical Role would play better in a lot of people's opinion with rules like games, which I don't agree with necessarily, but I can see where people are coming from, I don't feel like their audience actually would like rules light games or have the context to know even how to approach a rules light game, because that doesn't translate well over the internet. Rules light
Hmm.
games require a lot of like players have to take initiative, essentially. Players have to input because the game isn't forcing you to. And a lot of rules light games are better suited for people who are way more into the role play than the game itself. And I feel like the audience likes the idea of the game more, but they want it to play like how Critical Role plays, so they don't have context to how Rules Light works. So like, here's D&D, we're gonna look at D&D, and that doesn't translate to Rules Light like at all. So
Not really. Yeah, I also think the right answer is like the best game for Critical Role is whatever the group at that table has the most fun with. Is like, that's what they're having fun and telling the best stories with. Because that's the best adventure play. But I think one of the best, honestly, like I just remember this as we were talking, like one of the best and almost honest critiques I saw of Daggerheart came from actually Orbital Dropkick, the Lancer dev. Because I don't know if you saw his critique
I
about
saw it, and I actually don't agree with it,
you don't.
because I don't. And hi,
I want to hear
Pelage.
why.
Uh, First, actually, because I know there's some people here. The Lancer build video is actually still being worked on. Today's been a very hard day for me because my cat has been throwing up a lot lately. So that's been a problem. And then just things keep coming up. So like the video is recorded. I just need to finish editing it and we're good to go. But I did promise that the
That's
video
fair.
would be out sometime today. No, I don't like how Orbital Dropkick did it because it was very much demanding a division between rules light and the more crunchy aspects to tabletop. And Orbital Dropkick is like, or just do it like how I did, which is just make it completely separate. And that's not what Critical Role's combat system is designed around. Critical Role's, the combat system in Daggerheart is not a rules mid, you know, like combat thrown onto a rules light. It's intended to be played as rules light combat that just has a little bit more depth.
Yeah, I do think
And
at least pointing out that a fair point that is brought up is that there is an ability that that states like ability conditions that don't exist in the game
that's
that
not
then
true either,
shove,
actually.
trip, and grapple. Are they in the game?
So the thing is, that's not what it's referring to. And this is again the point of it's a rules like combat system. They mention that a player can at any point say, I'm going to try to grab them, do this, do that, whatever. And it imposes, and Orbital Dropkick did mention this, but didn't connect the dots. It imposes either the enemy becomes restrains or vulnerable. And then Orbital Dropkick mentioned that it doesn't state how long it lasts, but that's also not true. That's also in the rules. The GM needs to spend fear to
Ah,
end
okay.
an effect.
That makes sense. I was immediately thinking like, okay, yeah, the player spends a resource to inflict it, and then what the GM would spend their resource to get rid of it.
Yes.
So that makes sense.
So the thing is that obviously they didn't connect the dots and they got stuck in the same mire that a lot of other people have, which is everyone's trying to put the context of a more D&D-esque, you know, like a normal TTRPG's combat system on top of this system, which is not how it's designed. It's designed to be rules light that has some extra things. Battle Strategist, which is the thing they're talking about, reads, whenever you're making a roll to physically hinder a creature that isn't a weapon attack. So in a weapon attack could be any kind of like domain card, whatever, that would impose a thing. This is a thing where it's just like, okay, so I want to go up and I want to like grab them so they don't get away or whatever. You can spend hope to have advantage. On a success, you can choose to deal a d8 physical damage to the target. It's actually pretty big because normally this effect, it would just be you make the roll, you succeed, they either are vulnerable or restrains. Now that also can do damage, which can help out your team. And I want to double check real quick because I think they got another rule wrong on Nexus. Because they were saying that also the spending hope to get advantage is already a thing. I don't think that's actually the case. Oh, god damn it. I was signed in. Why am I not signed in? Oh, wait. Can I just sign in? Okay. I'm very annoyed because I don't know why this is not signed in. Oh, wait. There we go. All right. Should be playing an adventure using hope. Yeah. Okay. So I was correct. You can't use hope, as they said in the post, to gain advantage on something you're doing. You can only use hope to aid an ally in giving them advantage.
Oh, okay.
So no, Orbital Dropkick just didn't understand the game, which probably comes
Oh,
from
fair enough.
not actually playing the game.
Yeah, just reading through it. Yeah, which to be fair, they even said like reading through the game, not playing it.
Yeah. And so it's just very heavily is uninformed, you know. Not that I blame them for
I don't either.
sure, but I don't like this context of everyone having this super narrow view of just because you roll for damage or just because you have slightly more complicated moves that it demands a more complicated game system, when that's not what Daggerheart is going for. Daggerheart is going for like battle strategist, as I mentioned just here, is really good because anytime your character is opting in to take these actions that are restraining or whatever an enemy, like you would do in a narrative, like I I go and I grab this guy before he runs away or whatever, or like I grab the gargoyle's wings to stop it from flying, that kind of thing. This allows you to do damage with that maneuver and spend a hope to get an advantage on it, unless someone would manage to spend hope to aid you. You know, it's actually pretty good, but you have to take it in the context of how the game is designed, which is this is not designed as and this is very emblematic of the problem, which is funny that they use the same word, which they say that there's no action to shove, trip, grapple, or whatever. That's because it's a rules like game. It's whatever the players say they try to do. There's not like a specific action for it, you know. The only conditions are, you know, like I said, restrained or vulnerable. So that being the case, they're looking for rules that don't need to be there because it's not the context of the game.
You know, it is good that I brought that up then, because that is literally the topic of bad table talk takes. I
Yeah,
read
true.
that as someone who has not played it and didn't fully get the rules, and I was like, ah, makes sense. That's interesting. Maybe, and also read it as like a, oh, that's a good thing to bring up for the fact there's a beta test. Maybe they'll address that for when the game gets its full release. Turns out, no, they just didn't get it.
Yeah, he says here, there's nothing that defines shoved, tripped, grappled, etc. in the body text. There is. It's anytime a player would do this, they either can impose those two conditions. So it's just they don't know what they're talking about because they didn't play the game, and they're trying to overlay specific rulings on specific actions over a rules like game, essentially. So yeah, it's just a thing where it's a style of game a lot of people are not super familiar with, don't have a lot of context for, and thus a lot of people are really just missing the mark on what actually the game is about. And I guess now's a really great time to go into table talk takes, because we had almost an inverse of this with a Brennan Lee Mulligan tweet, or not even a tweet,
Yeah,
uh
an interview excerpt
an
that went
interview with
viral.
Polygon that Brennan Lee Mulligan had, which I haven't read the full thing, and it feels like there might be some context, but more or less what the tweet said was actually, you know what, I would like to
I
do
have the full
this.
thing up. I have the at least the excerpt that went viral up right now.
Fun
I
is
can
the
hear
first
you.
priority. Searching for the crunchy mechanics is for some people fun. I'm assuming is what you're saying. But usually leads to soapbox rules lawyering that can feel like bullying. Rules light is a good thing. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is Orbital Dropkick feels like someone who's made their own game that's been successful and now feels like they can talk about tabletop in general. When honestly, Lancer has some of the worst rules light applications for their pilots I've seen in gaming.
Yeah, it's kind of just like non-existent rules.
The
Like
only thing they get
there's
are their
no,
triggers,
yeah,
which don't actually apply anything. And like, like I could see, right, if you mixed Monster of the Week with Lancer, you would have a pretty interesting game. The implications of what your pilot can do using Monster of the Week esque mechanics intermixed with having the more rules dense Lancer combat would actually be very interesting.
because
But
there'd be mechanics.
yeah, exactly. So this is one of those things where it's like, just because you made a good game does not make you a reliable source when it comes to talking about all types of tabletop, right? And this is a very common thing in this Brendan Lee Mulligan tweet, which if you can send me a link to
I can
it,
send you a link to the tweet. Yeah.
because I'd like to at least grab the image for the chat.
I want to see if I can track down the article.
Let's see here. I should just make a folder for like, I'll put this in my video assets. Here we go. Wait, what happened? That's where I saved this. Why is it a JP large file?
Like if you downloaded it from Twitter.
No, I just clicked. Weird. 1 second.
Weird. You gotta get the extension that you can save everything as a PNG, Doug.
I mean, it's never been a problem when I've done it this way before. That's just
Weird.
interesting. Okay. Resources, general tabletop. Oh, god damn it. Not that file. Video assets. Here we go. All right. Make this visible. Expand. Okay, shrink a little. All right, I'll read it here together because I feel like this is interesting, and what's being said here is and is very indicative of a different type of conversation, I feel like. So, calling D&D a combat-oriented game, in parentheses, would sort of be like looking at a stove and being like, this has nothing to do with food. You can't eat metal. Clearly, this contraption is for moving gas around and having a clock on it. If it was about food, there would be some food here. What you should get is a machine that is either made of food or has food in it, which is very weird to have as an analogy because literally your stove could just have food in it. What machine has food in it all the time? So, very bad analogy, but anyway, I'm going to bring the food. The food is my favorite part. People say that because D&D has so many combat mechanics, you're destined to tell combat stories. I fundamentally disagree. Combat is the part I'm least interested in simulating through improvisational storytelling. So I need a game to do that for me, while I take care of emotions, relationships, character progression, because that shit is intuitive and I understand it well. I don't intuitively understand how an arrow moves through fictional airspace, which is also very silly because you don't really need to have that much of an understanding to figure out how an arrow works.
True. You know, honestly, to be completely honest with like analyzing this, I feel like the only part of this that I fully really don't agree with is like the analogy that he's trying to make.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the part where he's saying that trying to make a value statement that like of just like D&D is purely for like narrative experiences. No, that's your play style. That's you with your table of highly trained improv like comedians and improv actors because you're all from UCB and like
Okay,
highly trained in this.
so
Like
that's the
that's your
thing.
that's your play style.
I agree, and that's where I think generally the take is. But
Yeah.
I feel like that's not the conversation that was being had, and I feel like this particular clip is misleading because you can see here. I'll bring it back up. He says here. It says, because D&D has so many combat mechanics, you're destined to tell combat stories. I feel like what he's actually talking about, the actual point he's making here, is that he doesn't like the emphasis of the combat part of D&D. And so to him, it's it's a role-playing experience, which I think a lot of people can agree on.
Mhm.
And saying that D&D is purely a combat game or that all your games need combat is not the intent behind the game's design. But this particular cutout, I think, misrepresents the idea that he thinks that D&D isn't designed for combat. That's not what he's saying necessarily. What he's
Yeah.
saying is you're not combat isn't 100% necessary in your tabletop games, and there's every one of us, I guarantee anyone who's played tabletop for long enough have had sessions that had zero combat in them. So does that make it a combat game if you can legitimately have sessions without combat in it? And that, I think, is why this is misrepresented. I don't like his analogy he uses, because his analogy is pointless. First of all, saying a stove isn't food. I can't eat a stove. Everyone knows you make food with a stove, and in fact, you need a stove to make food. So his analogy almost turns on him by saying, yeah, but you need a combat to tell a story.
Yeah, I get like
Because
the
you need the
point.
stove
I
to
get the
make
point that he's
food.
trying to make, and it's that like yeah, D&D, all the rules when you look at it are inherently combat rules, but like that doesn't mean that it is inherently a pure combat game, because like I like his point of at our table, like I'm here to tell improv stories and have all these like great character role play moments. I can carry that part on my back in the back of my players. I can have a game carry the combat on its back because I cannot do that. I think that is a great way to look at it, and I like that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I just think like yeah, that's a clunky analogy that he probably made up in the moment.
Yeah,
Having
of
seen a
course.
lot of his stuff, that's who he is.
Yeah.
That's the kind of person how he talks.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is the implication of what he's talking about is more he rejects the idea that D&D needs combat to work and tabletop needs combat is what he's saying. He could have done it better, but he does a lot of things improv, and I'm sure he went off the cuff and he said something that in the end doesn't look great because, again, like I said, I feel like this particular clip is missing context for whoever's reading it. Like, I'm sure even even in the full context might not represent like maybe how the question was asked or whatever.
Even like he might have even like went back and gave clarifiers of like this isn't my full opinion, or like not everyone's saying this, because I was coming into this like knowing we were gonna chat about this. I remember reading this at first, like not fully sitting here examining it and talking about it. I remember thinking like, oh yeah, at most I just don't fully agree with like declaring this, like, or even being like at worst this feels like a statement of him ascribing his play style to like what D&D is inherently like game mechanically.
Yes.
But like when I'm actually reading this, all this more is a refutation of a group of people trying to say what their play style is the true of what D&D is. He's just responding to other people.
Yeah.
That's more what this is.
That's why I believe the context is, because that's how it feels like it's
Yeah.
being presented. Again,
The specific part of people say that is what he's saying that brings all this. The first part of the analogy is the part where it's like that's clunky. Second paragraph I think is just inherently more of the point. It's the better point.
yeah, people say that because D&D has so many combat mechanics, you're just doesn't tell combat mechanics. That's what I picked up on, and that's why I feel like this particular part was missing context. So, uh let's break this down a little bit more, because I feel like it hits an interesting point, and it hits the main point of the today's like table talk I really want to talk about, which is there's a very wide interpretation of what constitutes a tabletop RPG, which is why I feel like there's been so much discourse currently around rules light games, because Darrington Press, who's associated with Critical Role, is making more rules light games, and it's just not jiving with a lot of people because it doesn't match how they contextually view tabletop. Because to a lot of people, what makes tabletop fun and interesting, why you pick up a book in the first place, are the rules and the mechanics. Because after all, what is the point of playing a tabletop game at all if it isn't to get mechanics and rules to construct how you approach the game? Because you can always just tell a story. You can always just sit with your friends and just tell a story. It's the rules that changes the context of how that story is played out, and that's what people are looking for. So when a lot of people see a game that has a much reduced scope of mechanics, it feels like a lesser experience, because what they're wanting is something that adds more context to how they approach the game. It's one of the and the thing is it's on all levels. Even amongst rules like games, I'm someone who looks at rules like games and judge whether I like them or not based on the actual mechanics they provide. Because in all honesty, I've seen some rules like games that seem so dry of anything that it just doesn't feel like worth investing in, while other games feel like there's some interesting mechanics, some interesting way that can alter. Like Monster of the Week, I feel is very interesting because your characters get abilities that actively affect the story. Tons of times I was able to pull random bullshit out of my backpack in Monster of the Week, and that was a mechanic input into the game that you couldn't just say I pull out random artifact at any time. Only characters with the ability I had could do that. That's interesting.
And I like that it's specifically tied to come up with something interesting and creative. Like it's directly promoting you to do something fun, improv in the moment, like think creatively and like something true to your character, which you have. It's elements like that like elements where Monster of the Week has these cool moments, but then also when you look at it, there's other parts where it's like mechanically, yeah, this is a very basic rules light game. That like other people playing it, it could be a very boring experience depending on who's running it.
Exactly. And what Dead Phoenix here is very interesting because it misses kind of some of the point, which is, yeah, true. D&D does not need combat to work. You just need to ignore 75% of the rules and only apply the 25% of the rules in the game. D&D, the thing is, when it comes to roleplay specifically, role-playing around the mechanics, using role-playing aspects that are not necessarily tied to it, is just as viable as anything that has a mechanic. Playing as a character in tabletop, like I said, we all have had those sessions where our characters didn't have any combat in an entire session, but that's because we're characters in this world that uses these mechanics, and thus their experiences are somewhat influenced. All the time I have characters who try to in-game kind of describe meta aspects of the game by just kind of representing it by their experience or coloring it with their experience. making that really valid. You know what I mean? That's what brings it value, and that's what makes D&D interesting for a lot of people, is that a lot of what their characters do and can do does actually reflect their role play and how they approach the game. So again, D&D as a game is designed mostly towards combat and is not designed very well towards really anything else, honestly.
No.
And it's a very fair critique to mention that. I'm not saying that's not the case.
Oh yeah, I mean the rules are super built around fighting monsters, and like that's the whole point. Yeah, it's also just the large bit of, which also, I mean, I wish that D&D actually had like extra bits of more leveling. I wish it had a feat system thing in general. It's why I actually enjoy what my buddy does, who has homebrewed 5e to the point where it's basically 5.5 in kind of Pathfindery. Because we actually have horizontal leveling in 5th edition. It's crazy, I know. Which gives us out of combat abilities that we can actually utilize. But primarily the point that Brennan was making is specifically, he can fully carry all of the roleplay moments. He just needs a game that'll fully carry all the combat moments, which I think is a valid way to look at it. Though also, yeah, but I will also say the Dimension 20 is the only actual play show I've ever watched and like fully enjoyed, like full campaigns of, because it's well made and I like the cast of it a lot. Or at least it's well made in my standards of it's short and edited. Yeah, I also like it because they fully operate on rule of cool, because fuck the rules. If you nat 20, you can just do it. I fully agree with that mentality.
Yeah. James, have you seen the recent image from the Polygon review with Brennan? I'll put it back on screen if you haven't yet. Okay. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about.
That's what we're talking about.
Go ahead. Write out your thoughts while we continue talking. Because I'm more than happy to talk about it, but we already kind of described the context, and just to kind of like refresh on that, I don't believe what Brennan is actually talking about is reflective of what D&D is as a game, rather how he uses it as a tool. And I think that his analogy is working towards that, which is D&D isn't a fine meal, it's a stove used to make a fine meal, I think would be a better way to contextualize what he was saying. But the bad part about it is that Brennan is completely missing the mark of, he just admits that D&D is a combat game with talking about the things that he needs it to handle for him. You know what I mean? And this is a thing that, again, like all tabletop, it doesn't matter how crunchy your game system is predicated on the idea that you're telling a narrative that is using game aspects to enhance the story in some way, or to give a sense of like randomness to it. Like even Shadowrun is most interesting because of the stories you tell with it, not how the mechanics are played necessarily. And for people who like Shadowrun, they can say, I really like the mechanics. That's true, but you're playing it because mostly you're telling interesting stories with those mechanics. And the same thing can be said with D&D. And the idea of like a lot of his biggest moments in the show are him saying you roll nat 20 and you do X because it normally won't work that way. That's not true. There's a lot of clips I absolutely love of the absolute dumb shit that happens in the game. Either one, because D&D's rules are bad, or two, because there's just a really funny character moment that happens.
Funny character moments, and then the occasional bit I've seen where it's like, oh, that's a genuinely good interaction of the rules. Like, there's the 2 moments I can remember of a character with a magic item that when stabbing, he can then teleport freely 30 feet, where he then is falling off a cliff. He's 20 feet down, and he stabs himself in the gut to save his life. And it's like, that's metal as shit.
Yeah.
Or a moment where a character, the barbarian, Gorgug is like being mind controlled, and then is like he tricks the guy controlling him to allow him to rage, which he has mindless rage. And like moments like that where you're like, oh, that's actually really clever, like rule interactions. I like that. And it's like, oh, maybe 5e is good. Wait, no, it isn't. Don't think like that.
Right,
It's
yeah,
a trap.
because a lot of those things that happen are homebrewed things into the game in the first
Yeah,
place anyway.
exactly. But it's
But
interesting. It's interesting parts like that.
they also do use the idea of D&D as context for how they're made.
He
So
does make 5e look very good. It's
yeah,
the players play that game really well, and it's one of the only adventure like or actual plays I've ever sat down and watched and enjoyed combat. The combat is really entertaining in that game, like in all their campaigns, and it fucks me up because normally in actual plays like Critical Role and stuff, I skip through the combat because I find it really fucking boring. Like I just don't care.
yeah. Well, and see, this is the thing is, as James mentioned here, there's this take of like, well, I'm sure there's some better games out there. That might be true, but simultaneously, one, would the show have been as successful because, synonymous with D&D kind of pulls live plays currently? Two, does he need another game when all D&D is doing is adding weird context? Because the thing is, the fun thing about a jank game is you just kind of can do with whatever with it, and people can't even be mad because the game is just not designed well. It's like the whole Nat 20 thing, right? It's such a jank, unbalanced mechanic when you actually think about it, but it does create a lot of those fun moments that people really, really enjoy.
Yeah, the
So is
immediate
it
like
bad?
everyone cheering, losing their shit over the clutch nat 20, the GM, like, oh come on. Like that moment is like insane. But yeah, I do get what you mean with this. Like the why play anything else? D&D does everything when like, for asking anybody, like us, we're very Pathfinder second edition pilled. So usually it'll come down to we feel like Pathfinder carries everything. Like even
Well, yeah.
social rules and all that. Which I also you brought this up partially, Cam.
Mm,
The idea of even would the show have done better if it wasn't D&D, which actually is something that has been I know talked about recently because they had a production director leave recently. I know there was a podcast I watched, the podcast I enjoy a lot, The Yard, where they had Zach Oyama, who does Dimension
yeah.
20 a lot, where they talked about specifically some of in between a lot of their joking stuff, but they
Wait,
talked
Zach
about
Oyama is leaving?
oh no, different guy. A different guy left,
Oh,
but Zach
okay. Sorry. I
is
spaced
separate.
out. And I was like, Zach's
No, I get you.
leaving?
No,
No!
no. I would
Okay.
cry. I love him. Uh, but like Zach Oyama, for a brief bit, talked with them about starting up a D&D podcast because the Yard crew is also doing a D&D actual play,
Mm-hmm.
and talked about briefly the business of it, and basically was summing up in between like all of it that they talked about briefly that it is just D&D 5th edition. If you already are a successful brand, adding the words D&D is a win button.
Yeah.
Like that that's also one of the videos we talked about last time like I was here, that algorithmically D&D is very liked.
Yeah.
It kind of just works a lot. So it is I think it's the main thing of the product of D&D is kind of really suited. So they might be playing D&D, but also to an extent they kind of need to be. I don't know if they could afford to switch games really that much.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, right? So when you take it from Brendan's context, it makes 100% it makes 100% sense that they play D&D because he really doesn't care all too. I don't get me wrong. I think James said it earlier that he doesn't like combat. Brennan loves combat. He actually did. I've seen some videos where he talks about stuff. He loves getting into games. He's a really big nerd that way. I think that when you look at it from Dimension 20, it's skewed because it's obviously a performance. But he actually does love the numbers and everything in it.
Mm.
But the thing is, is even with what they're doing, most of it is homebrew. I mean, like, when was the last time they did they ever actually? I'm burping a lot because I'm drinking soda. I don't think they've ever done actually like uh vanilla D&D setting anything. I think it's all been
No.
just homebrewed whatever. And there's been stuff added on. I mean, it's the same stuff that you have to do with D&D in general to make it work, right? You have to make it your own. You have to throw in cool things because the obviously WotC doesn't want to. I mean, my god, recently them talking about like if I was to do D&D 5e again, I would have removed some classes. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's the thing people have been wanting the most. Which is something we can talk about.
Yeah, the whole like Chris Perkins talking about, I if we got to redesign this, I'd take out some of the classes.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
like the thing is, D&D is wonky and
it
thus
is.
it's going to have janky fun in it. Despite what anyone says. Uh what's a bad take?
The taking out classes.
Yeah, that's something I highly disagree with. And again, has been one of the most requested things by players is give us more classes because they refuse to do so.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, let's finish up the topic on Brennan because I don't want to come back to it if we don't have to.
Mhm.
Is the thing is they're having fun because the game is janky and they're just telling a story that gets the context of D&D on top of it, and there's even fun in the aspect of I use counterspell, GM goes and gets angry, right? Because some people just find that entertaining to piss the GM off, even though it's such an easy button to do so. I hate counterspell in D&D; it's the worst. Uh, but I think D&D works perfectly for what they want, and I think even under different contexts, other games might not be successful, not even algorithmically, but just because when you're playing a game that's better put together, it's a lot harder to have that jank in the end. That I think is what makes a lot of Dimension 20 specifically more interesting. I think in Critical Role, when it's a lot longer and it's a lot more like the players are taking it more seriously and being less improvisational with it. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm gonna go with it anyway. I don't think D&D works as well for Critical Role, and I think they would even probably do better with Pathfinder because, as we talked with Michael Sayer, a game is really good when the narrative is being supported by the mechanics. So I think all the people who are very legitimately upset at D&D because the mechanics don't really support the narrative have a lot going for them in that regard in the conversation. But when you do something like Dimension 20, the jankiness is kind of just a part of the fun. And so that being the case, you know, I would argue that it would be harder for them to actually use other game systems because what they're doing as like a production kind of hinges a little bit on that jank. And if they played something that was more sound, you would lose some of that flavor, which, you know, take as you will. I'm sure that if they were playing personally themselves out of it, they would play something like Pathfinder. Because my God, why would you play D&D when there's a game like Pathfinder that's just better D&D? In all honesty, I don't like bashing other games, but like I've yet to see a compelling argument to say that D&D is better than Pathfinder in any way other than janky fun.
It's that or just like personal taste or even just like your group of vibes with it or even just the other bit that I always think of immediately of like the immediate groups I've been in where I'm like, oh god, I never want to have them be in my Pathfinder table because it would never function. Because it's like the people where it's the conversations I've had with them where it's like the idea of them doing anything more complicated than making a single attack roll on their turn makes their head explode. And it's like, ugh, you went into a class entirely where the entire concept is you get a robot dog and then having a single extra action and creature that you control is overly complicated and ridiculous to you. And then the
Right.
idea of being like, now you're playing Pathfinder, you have 3 actions and feats, and it's like that's the only thing I could ever see. But yeah, I mean, we for all of us here, it's like it is just the better game. Which I mean, I even in a 5th edition game, there's still like the hurdles I have of like the 5e isms where I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah, and to be fair, so I was doing a little bit of research. On average, Kids with Runes did well, but it's a little bit older. At least compared to some of their newer things, when they deviate from D&D, the views tend to be generally worse.
That makes sense. The only other bit I can see is that the parts I've seen with Kids with Brooms that probably did the absolute best were specifically the Brennan Lee Mulligan clips, where he's just playing his character because, you know, it's Brennan Lee Mulligan.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I've watched that entire campaign. It was pretty good. The game itself was all right.
Yeah. So, you know, again, like they've played other games, and I'm sure like any person who plays tabletop regularly wants to like branch out every once in a while, because you just get that fatigue of the game. I think that still, like, there has to be a reason they're going to D&D, because I know Brennan is a gamer and is picking games based on fun, but mostly I think based on what works well on YouTube. And what they play at home is just probably different, because honestly, there's no shortage of popular D&D content creators I've heard who are currently playing Pathfinder off their channel. But anyway, so let's wrap around back to what you were talking about before. What was that point you were trying to make?
Good question. Which one?
It was right before I tried to finish up with the Brennan Lee Mulligan stuff.
Great question.
I don't remember. I remember there was a thing.
Removing classes. Removing classes.
Removing classes, right. Okay, here we go. Critical Role switch is very interesting. I think they will swap to Daggerheart because I think they have the clout to do so.
Yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't.
And it behooves them because they own the game, right? So, you know, it's free advertising.
And I think Critical Role, yeah, I think exactly that. They have the clout. They can swing the Critical Role dick around to be like, we don't need the D&D branding to do well.
And they already play a lot of non-D&D games. So
exactly. The amount of times I see I still have their like alerts. I put the bell on so long ago when I was still actively watching, and the amount of times it's not D&D.
But yeah, so it wasn't Christopher Perkins, I think. It was...
I thought it was Chris Perkins.
Was it Chris Perkins? I might be getting them confused. Was it Chris Perkins? Or was it Jeremy Crawford?
Oh, it might have been Crawford.
It's Chris Perkins? Okay, I'll just believe you.
Oh, I was right initially.
You were right. I was wrong. I get the two, like, I know visually.
I do too.
Who they are.
To be fair, I also get them completely mixed up.
But I get their names mixed around all the time. But Chris Perkins, honestly, I used to really be on the side of Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford when it came to designing D&D. I felt like a lot of it was just a lot of company overhead. Kind of just telling them what to do, how to move the game. I think with this last bit, my opinion has been changed, and I think they're just hacks. Honestly. Because the idea that people need context for classes is idiotic at all. Because the reason why a person picks a class is mostly for the aesthetics of the class. When he was talking in the interview, he's just like, you know, like what is a barbarian? How do you contextualize that to a person? I don't know. Art in your book, what we know of what barbarians are culturally, because they've been used in games, RPGs, for as long as I can remember. What makes it different than a fighter? I don't know. It mostly Vikings, honestly. Big axe wielding, damage, rage. Like, you don't need to play D&D to even understand what a barbarian is and understand why that is different than like a soldier. Wizard and sorcerer is a little bit more understandable because honestly it swaps around all the time. But that's okay, because when a person is looking in your game for the first time, they're going to look at what they can do and decide, I would rather do this than that. So when you're like, oh, the sorcerer is born with magic and has magic bloodlines, people are like, oh, that's so cool. So I can have the blood of a dragon? Yeah. Or like, you're a wizard, and they're like, I could be a wizard? And it's like, yeah. You know? So like,
Yeah.
the idea that it sounds like what he believes in is that people are too dumb to understand the concepts of classes, or they need special context to make a decision, and thus it's better if everything is just fighter until 3rd level, and then they have subclasses to differentiate.
Cause like I just went through the actual article. Like I just quickly read through it. And it is well, primarily it's also his personal answer of why why this isn't 6th edition D&D, which is primarily because 5e is selling too well. That's the reason, because like we went to 4th edition from 3rd and so on, because like there's a downturn in sales, therefore we pivot and build the game up from scratch. That's not happening, but we want to redesign.
Right,
and
which
then
makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Only if they had made a better game.
Yeah, and then
like Pathfinder's Remaster makes sense because they didn't really actually change the game, but because with the new wave and OGL stuff, they built upon what they already had. So it's not really a different game. D&D 5e is not well done, and so when you're remaking a game, it's just going to feel like a different game, or it's just going to be as bad as the last one. Neither are good options.
And like, I don't know. I don't know if this is just because like we're Pathfinder pilled, you know?
I don't think so.
But
honestly,
like when I'm reading through this and it's purely like choice paralysis at 12 classes, I'm just like, huh? At 12? But like the point that it's making is something that I keep seeing, which is the design philosophy that's been coming out for so many games ever since 5th edition's been like booming, because it's been hitting a lot of things, which is the idea of streamlining everything to the point where it becomes way simpler for newer players. Because that's the concept for this. Like, the entire point is streamlining stuff and condensing it to make the options easier. Because like when I'm looking at this, what I'm hearing is like the same idea as inherently something like I've seen tabletop games, or even like I guess an immediate example is something like, it's not a 1-to-1, but something like Dragon's Dogma, where you have like the only classes you have is fighter, wizard, thief, archer, and then like you then can expand from there, because that's literally what he's saying of you have way less classes if he's designed from the ground up. And then Wild West for subclasses. But when all I hear from that is, isn't that the same problem? Then your choice paralysis hits you at level 3.
Right,
like,
yeah.
Doesn't that what that happens?
Imagine, right? I can't pick at level 1 what I want to be. Thank God there's only 3 classes. But you know, when I level 1, but level 3, I have 100 classes to pick from.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do.
Now I have like 30 subclasses to pick. What the fuck do I do? Like, what? Yeah, and also like I know Pathfinder First Edition was way worse. Like me having the worst choice paralysis of my life was me trying to play Wrath of the Righteous. Like, what the fuck do I pick?
Yeah.
But like, uh, that's my thought process of that. But also, I guess that's easier to design because what do the subclasses give you? Like fucking 4 abilities, and then that's it. Because I don't know, my philosophy is I'd like classes with distinction and interesting stuff. I'd like my classes to actually have things that separate them because I want different options.
I mean, like, I
It'd be
wouldn't
cool.
necessarily be opposed to the idea of like a TTRPG that specifically starts off at like 3 branches and then keeps branching out as you keep getting further in the game. Like,
I'm certain there might be games that do that.
there might, and I think that's not a bad idea
No.
necessarily. The argument he's making is we want to make it simpler for people to make choices. People get choice paralysis when there's 2 options. You know, back when movie stores were a thing, I know I wasn't the only person who went into a game store to rent a game, and I had 2 games I really wanted to play, and I had to make a choice, and it sat there for like 5-10 minutes trying to decide between 2 games because they both sound really awesome. So unless you can somehow reduce my choices down to 1, choice paralysis is just going to be a thing regardless. And then further undermining his own point, infinite subclasses, or at least a lot of subclasses, still creates that issue, and in addition actually creates more problems because a subclass changes the context of how you play that class going forward. So you need to read the abilities of that subclass in order to make a decision. But you actually need to make less choices when you're deciding, do I want to play a fighter or a wizard? Because you know how those 2 things contextually play differently. So you don't need to read through all the wizard abilities to understand how a wizard plays differently than a fighter. So that makes it actually an easier choice than a subclass, which completely recontextualizes how your class plays. Because now we're not just talking about whole playstyles, we're talking about minutia changes to playstyle. So, yeah.
It's very happy that they're not redesigning this completely to do that, because that'd be even dumber.
I mean,
like,
I'd welcome it, because let other games shine. Make D&D such a shit pile that other people don't want to play. It's just it's so silly. I don't like anything, anything I've heard for the last I was literally like gaslighting myself into thinking that Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins were decent designers being pushed down by a company this whole time, because honestly, now that I've just been reviewing everything they've been saying and talking about, it's all garbage. It's all just it all is just not game design, and more just how do we make idiots happy, because that's how they contextualize everything. It's like, how do we make less choices for our players because they can't make a choice between characters?
How do we get new people just to like new people who don't want to like super read into it, or but also just I don't know how many people have had that major of difficulty where they're like requesting Wizard of the Coast to redesign everything.
Well,
because people have been getting on just fine.
Well,
granted,
not really.
I've had experiences where that's not the case, because I've been playing with some people where literally you have too, where it's like people can't figure out how to roll D20 and add a number to it.
Well, yeah.
But still.
But I mean, like, even then, like, the game, there's a reason why D&D 5e is one of the most homebrewed games of all time. And the thing is like, I don't know how they're so uninformed when literally some of the most like requested for and done content on DM's Guild are new class choices or subclass choices, so how can they possibly think that people don't want new classes when in actuality they just want more classes? And you could say, well, you could just turn those into subclasses, And it's just like, okay, but some subclasses are just awful, so I don't trust you guys to actually contextualize everything going into a subclass to make it actually feel like a class, right? Because
Yeah, it's like all I'm seeing from this is mainly his personal design philosophy when it comes to 5e. And the reason there's been no new classes in the game is because like he believes that in 5th edition, the moment you start going from those core 12 classes, it starts being too there's too much repetition because all the party roles are filled by the 12 classes.
yeah,
Which is like
also,
what I don't agree.
yeah,
You should
which,
have a couple more.
yeah, and I mean, like, do them differently. Pathfinder has done this just fine. Pathfinder's releasing so many class. They have 22 or 23 now. I think it's 23 now.
I
Uh,
also want to mention another part from this article that I think is really funny because it's like, come on, man. At the end of the article, it feels a little bit like a quote, but I don't know if it's just me reading into it negatively because I feel I don't like D&D that much. Uh, they talk about how it took Baldur's Gate 3 and the massive amount of appeal that game has for them to realize that if they change the rules, the core rules of 5e slightly, it won't fuck up 5th edition's popularity.
I mean, maybe I think the problem with the idea is Baldur's Gate has been out for only like not even 6 months, I think, and we know from talking with Michael Sayer recently, a lot of this stuff when it comes to like big changes due to editorial stuff and all that needs to be more like a year plus in advance. But with how they've been talking about everything, I don't think they've been putting in that footwork. So
And
maybe.
the specific quote that they say here is still this is a quote from him. Like let's see, he talks about like still Baldur's Gate 3 proves that tweaks can be made for D&D 5e and still retain its core feel, something we're staring down the barrel of with the revised core rulebooks. Or that's I guess that specifically saying that like, oh yeah, they really like the idea that Baldur's Gate has some house rule feel in that like, oh man, these tweaks we saw it and people really liked it. Oh, and that means we can jump from Baldur's Gate 3 to a tabletop game to some other expressions of D&D, and very few people will blink an eye. We just provide tools and inspiration. That's the
That
mentality.
sounds super lazy. That sounds like
Yes,
we don't have to make a great game because people will just make a game for us in a sense.
that is the part that's my thought process where I immediately saw that, and it's the okay, so someone else did the rules, or a lot of this is because you are so dreadfully terrified of altering anything in your game. Because, like, when I go up earlier, one of the other reasons is because they talk about releasing anything in Unearthed Arcana and then getting a lot of feedback where from people being like anytime they try to step out from anything that goes away from 5th edition, they get a lot of negative feedback, at least in their words. So maybe over time there's a eternal design idea of just never step away from 5th edition, and then business wise stepping away from 5th edition is also a bad business move because it sells very well. And so also then design wise you look at Baldur's Gate and you're like, oh thank god, if we tweak the rules to add their good house rules that they made up, no one will realize it.
I should just rename the stream to Bashing D&D again.
Yeah, that's a good title, which is what we do.
Yeah. No, I mean I agree completely. It's just funny that we're back here again because
Yeah.
I legitimately most of what I've been doing recently has been trying to say, hey, a game doesn't need to be perfect to exist. Candle Obscure is not my favorite rules light game, but it can exist. I don't like shit talking D&D. Don't get me wrong. Uh and I'm not necessarily shit talking D&D when we're talking about like these design choices. We're talking about overall game design and some of the problems with D&D. For people who enjoy D&D, I hope for the best. I hope that the games work as well. I just made a really good argument earlier uh, that Brennan Lee's Mulligan's, like how they run Dimension 20, I think kind of hinges on the jank of D20 Dungeons and Dragons. So, you know, like it has its place. You want me to shit talk Pathfinder 2e then lol? Yeah, sure, go ahead. I'm actually curious to see what you could say.
Yeah, and also just to
why is it so easy to patch D&D though? Yeah,
stop being such an easy target, 5e. And just to clarify for what we're specifically talking about, antagonist RPG, this isn't like, you know, the fact it's a video game. It is just there are some key staple like rule changes that Baldur's Gate 3 made that I would argue are kind of staple additions that, like, dang, that is what I wish this was actually just core rule 5e. I have to like replay Baldur's Gate to get it a touch, but like I gotta say, jump being a bonus action and just being a thing you can freely do, kind of fucking nice. I actually really like that. Being able to freely shove as a bonus action is really nice. There's a lot of like extra added things you can do that just make maneuvering and playing way better. Larian did a lot of extra stuff that makes playing more fun that I think you could easily slot into your home game and no one would complain.
Yeah. So yeah, and so to kind of get back into it, like the thing is, we're talking about design principles. We're talking about things that players would want. Like a lot of our arguments that we're having here is what a player who plays D&D, as people who have played D&D ourselves, would actually want versus what they're saying they're doing, which is, one, removing classes because it's too many choices, but having more subclasses because those choices, I guess, don't matter. And also, yeah, what Dead Phoenix said earlier. No, James said that they need a 70% like on their surveys to consider something good, and those are the things they don't touch, and they fix all the things that are lower than that, but not using that as context. You know, like they're trying not to change Paladin all that much because it's just highly rated, but they've said nothing about how to like balance for it instead. And they've even said that there's just a lot of things that they just don't want to change because it'd be too much work.
I think it's just they're in a position too where they just got a really dangerous position where I think they're inching around in this like interview or at least panel. They are just in a sad state where if they change too much about 5e, I think it's just a bad business move too, and they know that. And then also, I think there's some laziness there too that I might have just seeped in over the years because that's definitely like it might have. I don't think it started out with the it might have seeped in over time with the, oh man, we just don't have to do anything. Cool.
I don't know.
Then like it definitely feels that now where it's just like the part where that's specifically of the we can sneak in Baldur's Gate 3 stuff and no one will notice. And it's like that part to me feels like, okay, I don't know about just like someone else did the work, you see that other people like it and now you can include it. That feels like if you could just design some rules, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? As honestly, in all honesty, it's not like everyone right now is calling for a 6th edition because we want a different version of 5e. What we want is an actual complete version of 5e that's just, you know, better balanced, more written out, more options for players when their characters level up rather than multi-class, which D&D's multi-class is the worst multi-class in my opinion because it always comes at a cost, and it's usually a cost that deviates from your initial character design. The part that scares me the most is the fact that we know so little about what's actually going to be in this book. Yeah, that's pretty crazy because it means they're not confident about talking about anything.
I know
There
the art for the wizard, and I know they moved all the graphs 2 pages backwards to not scare new players. That's all we got.
that I think that broke me.
Yeah,
That's
that's legitimately their reasoning. They didn't want to scare off new players by showing them a graph immediately.
oh my god.
Though I do think it could be argued that
I'm
it
looking at
might
you,
look
James.
better.
Save me somehow.
You can argue this. You actually work in this field.
It doesn't look like total ass. It's better. Are you being facetious? Are you saying it looks a lot better design wise? I mean, okay. If it looks better, sure. Okay.
All I
I
saw
can get on that.
all I saw was the first page has rules that immediately tell you to turn to the graph on the next the next
I'm gonna
pages.
be a graph for Halloween now.
Ooh, be afraid of me. You haven't played
Numbers.
5e. Oh, my choice paralysis.
I mean, yeah,
I
with the
don't know what to
millions of D&D
play.
players, it's bound to be pretty scary, right?
Oh, I don't know the difference between sorcerer and wizard. Oh.
Just a big, just white board and just in terrible handwriting. Option A, option B, option C, but with a devil face.
Yeah. Oh, I get 5 spell slots at that level? Oh god. Also, I do like your shit talk on on Pathfinder's second edition, James. You know, I think all of those are good points. Where is Monster Core 2? Where is your remastered Secrets of Magic? Why aren't you working at the company? And where are the mechs in Pathfinder? Though, however, I think that last part's your job.
Okay, so I see the image. I'm looking at now. One, that art is baller.
It is a great art. It's great art. It's well done.
I'm so 100% behind that art. I think it's really cool. Man, all their light magic stuff looks really good. Even in the first core book, the light magic guy cleric looked really cool.
I wish playing a 5e wizard felt like that.
I still I like how the graph is done better. Correct, true. But I don't like the idea behind it, and I feel like, I mean, spacing out the graphs to look better, I think is fine. I think if you're not having a full stat spread looking thing in front of a player, I think that can only be necessarily a good thing for the kind of vibe they're going for. But I feel like they are taking this idea just a step too far. Not necessarily this. I think, yeah, I do think the new graph looks better. For sure. Yeah, I do think it looks better. Okay, I do think it looks better visually. I agree. I what I don't like is the idea that, well, okay, if it was just designed to look better, okay, all right, I've been saved. You saved me, James. Thank you. I appreciate you. Multi-class should have been moved to the last page. I appreciate you a lot. I just I don't know, man. It just makes me feel like they think everyone is dumb, or they think their major player base is children.
Or
When
like freshly rotating, like I don't know. I I feel like people can learn new rules, or just there's only so much streamlining that is effective or like is necessary. I get it. I get the idea of it, because I know that it's something that I've been seeing now, because I talked really good about it a while ago. 10th edition Warhammer 40k. I've been looking into it a bit more because people have brought it up on my channel, and I've been looking into other Warhammer channels recently with some crossover stuff I've been doing. And the fact that 10th edition, its streamlining attempt has been kind of lackluster. It's done some good. It's not as bad as some people are saying. However, one of the things it has done, which is the bad thing of streamlining your game, which is something James did kind of say here. Part of the thing of streamlining, kind of said about cutting part of the description and flavor text, is you do cut some of the personality of
Yeah.
your game inherently when you do that. Because like one of the things that's lost about Warhammer and the Warhammer factions when you streamline them is that all the things that made them unique is kind of gone, and they
Yeah.
kind of start to feel a little more samey. So it's like, what's the point?
I don't know.
And,
I think the thing with D&D specifically that they could do if they hired some actually good game designers is actually just reformat the game to be simpler and to, you know what, honestly make the game easier. like
yeah,
I like here's the thing, right? Uh if you're trying to go for this kind of like idiotic fan base that it seems like they're aiming for, even though I'm sure they would say no, that's not what we're doing. It feels like it. Uh you know, one of the most egregious and annoying things in D&D in general is how swingy the dice can be. How often it feels like your character can just roll like shit 3 times in a row and just do nothing, especially in like in combat. I mean, all they had to do was just use a proficiency system similar to Pathfinder's and just not scale monster AC like all that much at all to compensate. And you just make a
oh
game where your characters reliably hit better. And I feel like
yeah,
even that small change would apply a lot better to what they're aiming for. So you mean proficiency without level? Yeah, kind of, pretty much, very similar.
this is actually similar to what I said earlier. Like Omen, I feel like the 5e team is very rusty on making new classes is because the Unearthed Arcana, the Mystic, got so heavily derided. I'm IMO deservedly so is stupid and broken. I remember the Mystic Unearthed Arcana. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous and very cool. It was cool and interesting and very unique. I thought it looked fucking fun because it was like, oh shit, 5e's doing something. They're working. Uh, but it's also that fact because literally in that interview I was just like talking about, Chris Perkins says they get a lot of negative feedback whenever they pivot from anything that isn't viewed as this isn't 5e enough, which to me seemed like whenever they do anything. So like I think inherently there could be some very obvious problems with Mystic. I could have just addressed it and released it anyways.
See, and now
I don't see the issue.
this is another thing that I think is a missing piece of this puzzle. I just thought of this. They keep getting heavy criticism when they ever try to deviate from D&D 5e. Is it because whenever they make something that's not D&D 5e, it's actually just bad?
That
And they
also is
just
probably
keep
true.
making some bad things. So like, oh man, we can't go outside the formula because people don't like it. When in actuality, they just can't design a game or shit outside of their mechanics. And so they're getting this super skewed result where like we know people want the game to be the same. No, they want their game to be good. They want their game to actually be well designed. And your hack team can't do it.
Like I'd have to relook at what the Mystic was actually offering. So all I remember was reading through it and being like, this seems really cool and like an actual interesting design. Like it just sounded interesting. Um and I was like, this should be supported just because they're finally doing something. And then like, yeah, it could be patched up, it could be fixed a bit, but whatever. And then like, I don't know. If you're getting a lot of feedback that's like this is overpowered, I don't know, adjust the math and then release it. You can just fix the math. It's not the fuck, our beta test came back negative and then we got all this feedback saying that like these are the problem areas. I guess we throw it in the trash. It's like no, you fix the problem areas and you revise. What what do you yeah, that they like the subclasses, which is fucking boring. You know, also another bit with Unearthed Arcana that pissed me off. There's something that they did. There used to be a thing. I don't know if y'all 5e heads know this. There was a monk Unearthed Arcana subclass called Way of the Soul Knife. Way of the Soul Knife does not exist anymore, and now it is a rogue subclass that is infinitely fucking lamer. That is like Soul Knife Rogue, and it has none of the interesting properties of the Monk subclass. And it's like the Monk subclass allowed you to like alter your punch damage, like psychic punches, and like detect thoughts and like track people. It was really fucking cool. I played one of them. It was really fun because it allowed you to vary up your attacks using ki, and it made like monks really cool and non-spiritual, which is always my thing with like 5e monks. Like I just don't want like I just want to beat somebody's ass. I don't fully want like key blasts and shit. And it's like it was cool, and I don't know what the problem was that made them just be like, let's give Rogue another subclass.
I
It's not like
also
they
have
don't have more.
I also have a story of a class or a subclass I really liked. It was the wizard that could change what their saves affected on their spells by altering the spell. I can't remember what that subclass was called all this time ago. Apparently, they just shifted that into what eventually became the Arcanist, or whatever whatever the crafty one they just made was.
Yeah, that is the Arcanist.
Okay, the Arcanist. Does that sound broken? Yeah, actually, there was a really broken combination with it, but like I liked the idea behind it. Artificer. There it is.
Yeah.
Artificer. I don't even remember. It was a long time ago. It was like one of the first Unearthed Arcana they were talking about. Back when I was still playing D&D. So it was a while ago. And I really liked the idea. I thought that the application was interesting. I feel like they could have definitely adjusted it to be less broken. Also, what isn't it a thing in D&D? My knowledge of D&D has degraded so much over time, where like if a character is prone, they automatically fail reflex saves or something. Or
you'll fail a deck save if you're prone.
Like they just have to remove that. And like it becomes way less of a problem.
Man, I'm double checking the difference between Way of the Soul Knife Monk and the Soul Knife Rogue. And Soul Knife Rogue is just fucking like, I don't know, man. I'm looking at it because like the difference you get is like the Soul Knife is in Tasha. Yeah, like you get psionic dice and you get like you get like an expended resource. You can establish like telepathic communication.
Oh, stuns. It was stuns that happens.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, you get like a magic blade that you can use. Like you can create a psychic knife and all this. And it's like it's like really kind of basic. And then like Way of the Soul Knife Monk. Like for example, your core ability, your unarmed strikes can deal either psychic, piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning damage. You get to change that. You as a bonus action, you can spend your bonus action to increase your range of your punches by 30 feet. So that is your entire bonus action. You get a psychic slash, which does like a list of 5 abilities, or a sight to like you can just track somebody's mind. Spectral blades at level 11, you can punch through fucking walls. And like you can just forego a punch to punch somebody to like fight somebody through a wall. And then psychic form, you start flying through the air and can move through objects and have resistance to all physical damage.
Man, do I think they failed at their attempt at bounded? Yeah. If anyone says D&D has bounded accuracy, I laugh in their face because it is so not true. The advantage disadvantage system breaks accuracy so terribly anyway. I like advantage disadvantage, don't get me wrong. But it definitely breaks the balance of the game they're going for, because they tried going with smaller numbers, which means that things that give you a 50% chance of just rolling better are inherently broken. It's a, again, I understand D&D is something that definitely can work, definitely does work for a lot of people. And honestly, like playing Baldur's Gate, it's fun for
It's a
sure.
fun game.
Uh, I at the same time, I'm also someone who's like, but if they made it Pathfinder 2E based, I think it would be way better.
I would have a lot
But
more fun with combat if it was just second edition Pathfinder because I like the rules more. It's like to the same thing of like I'm having combat wise. I had more fun with Rogue Trader than I did with Baldur's Gate because I think the core rules of Rogue Trader is a more satisfying like core rule set.
yeah,
I think the story of Baldur's Gate was better than Rogue Trader, but like
I mean,
I
Baldur's
think just
Gate.
because I think Larian are just really good writers.
Yeah, well, and not only just in addition to that, they created so many ways players could use abilities in different ways, very ingenuitively to bypass certain things. One of my favorite
Yeah,
parts was uh in the tavern in the second act. I forget what it's called, something light. Uh if you're underneath it, you see a chest on the other side of like these bars. If you have cloud or smoke form or cloud form, whatever it's called, misty form, you can go through those bars and just get the chest on the other side.
makes sense.
And playing a warlock, that was really cool because I could go over, grab it, go back, short rest, all my spell slots are back. You know,
Yeah,
it's
and also like it's so many people testing it that allowed them to do that too. Because I imagine all the play test material, just people alpha and beta testing it, allowed them to see like, oh, a player tried to do something and like we didn't have a thing for that. We should sneak something in there,
yeah.
which helps.
And D&D does so little to promote that kind of gameplay because their stuff is so ambiguous that they're like, yeah, in D&D they mentioned that you can do this as a thing, but then they don't create the context within the game to get around it unless it's like maybe a specific adventure path, when all they could do literally is like for some of the traps be like, if a player has Misty Step, they can just go through this, or or like reward players for doing it by saying this spell is really good for getting through certain types of traps or getting out of like imprisonment, for instance. Like all they have to do is just contextualize in the spell how it would best be used rather
Mhm.
than just a description, and that would go a long way. There's so many ways. I gotta ask though, are we doing this kind of criticism about breaking the game with the benefits of hindsight? What do you mean? Because
Like
Misty Step is
specifically
not
about
breaking the
Baldur's Gate.
game. Or not
No,
Misty Step, but
that's
Misty Form or whatever.
like yeah, that's just like normal. That's just how the spell works, and the game is openly just like down for you to do that. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a whole area of Shar's Temple that is really annoying stealth wise, or pretty openly like just use Misty form.
yeah.
Which also yeah, Dead Phoenix. The uh, I assume if you have played the Rogue Trader game, some of the Warhammer stories in general, I'll say, are very basic. They ebb and flow. They go from like boring slogfest to like really engaging philosophical stories. But like the Rogue Trader story is probably one of the better video game stories that they've done. Mainly because I like the fact that it finally is a game that gives you the button to press in all of the 40k moral decisions, where it's like you know exactly the context of what this all might mean if you like know Warhammer setting, or
Yeah.
if you don't, because like there's so many parts where it's like the first planet you go to, it's like here is the situation, what do you do, and it's like
Iconoclast.
oh god.
I like how they made Iconoclast playstyle legitimately difficult. Because usually, like
Yeah,
in a lot of games, you play the good options because I think a lot of people are inherently good people. But
yeah,
in Warhammer, you're like, they had a demonic amulet in my ship. And no one knows. It seems like it might be something we can just easily get around, do I want to take the risk? Because I feel like dooming a few innocent people is actually the better choice. Because the ship might just be overcome with Daemon worshippers. And it might not even be their choice. That's the thing. It's like, it might not be an active choice. Because, like, Tzeentch just fucks with people's minds. They don't get a say in it more often than not. Unless they're like a Primarch. And even then...
No, even then, like, Magnus was fucked from the start. But, like, the part that gets me is there were some people critiquing the game early on, which I think is understandable, but it was some people being like not liking the fact that the game was making being a good person hard. And I'm like, I think that makes the moral decisions harder and more interesting. I like the fact that you are a person where you're in a situation where it's like, be the good person, and you're kind of punished for it in a system where being a good person is hard. And it's like, yeah, no, it's difficult sometimes being a good person in a system that fights against you. Still do it. Because if you need a fucking pat on the back and a gold reward to be a good person, you're not really a good person, are you?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Which I love. Like that's the part I like about Rogue Trader. I love those parts where it's like, if you're crying about like, I needed my gold and my weapons, but I like, there's the part in the beginning of the game where it's like, I know the threat of a demon world. A demon planet is a very bad thing. That is catastrophic for that spot and everywhere around it. Because what that'll do is that is a physical portal to the warp, which means that is a full area that demons can come through as they please. Normally, demons have set areas that they can only come and go from. So, a planet possibly becoming a demon world, that's bad. Exterminatus is kind of one of the few options you have to go with. And in that moment, I just sit there and think. And that's what I wanted from a 40k RPG, and I got it.
But kind of wrapping back around. So what
Yeah.
Oyman was saying, like, did we know that a spell having the kind of means of like, I ignore your BS OGM, now that we have seen a game where the spell actually works well? Like, I don't know what your problem is with the idea of something like that can just bypass a trap, because the thing is like things like Misty Form or whatever, that is only useful in the specific situations where you're getting around GM BS. So it doesn't have a lot of value unless you know you're going to run into it. So like preparing it is a choice. There's nothing wrong with having the right tool for a right situation. This is a bad idea in tabletop in general. A lot of people are like, but it's too easy if you have this thing to do this thing. It's like, yeah, that's why the player prepared said thing, you know? Like, people who don't like the knock spell, it's like, why do you need a rogue when you can just have a wizard with the knock spell? Because the wizard would need to prepare the knock spell and use it in case that you came across it. So it's a choice to have it prepare rather than another spell that might be useful in another situation. It's not wrong, for sure. And while I definitely like it more in Pathfinder, how it only gives you the ability to pick a lock rather than instantly pick the lock, I don't dislike how D&D has it done either, because there's ways in the setting you can go around it. Like the spell, the chests. The chest could be magically preventing the use of knock, for instance. So, like, there are ways you can prevent it. And yeah, no problem. I understand. Do we know how D&D can break itself depending on having advantage? Because we've seen D&D, like, where spells are actually balanced, like Pathfinder 2e. Taking in this context, and more concisely, do we know how 5e can break itself? Do we know how it can do it? Yeah, of course we do. It's very easy to run the math to figure it out. And it was broken before even I left D&D. It was very easy to identify. I mean, to be fair, there's a reason why there's so many D&D channels out there all about breaking the game. All they do is just make videos about using mostly spells in ways to break break the games without context of Pathfinder on top of it. So yeah, uh, we do know, and the criticisms we're coming at are like, what we're saying is just make the game work by fixing the numbers. That's it. You know, like advantage is strong. I agree. I think it's really good. Uh, so adjusting proficiency on top of it actually somewhat reduces how good advantage is, because over success is something that removes the advantages. Like a fighter's +2 in Pathfinder, like in a lot of combats, just look at how much the fighter beats the creature and be like, if I subtract 2 from this, would they still hit or crit? And most of the time, the +2 doesn't matter. The only time it matters is the additional crit chance more than anything. So the +2 is actually not that big of a thing because of over damage. And critting, in addition, can be over damage, where it's like a point of like, okay, fighter has a higher crit chance, but more often than not, the extra crit damage is just falling off after the enemy hits 0. So it was not super necessary. So, like, advantage works the same way, where it's just like, if you already have a pretty decent chance of hitting a creature and you get advantage and you just like, oh, I hit the creature, but slightly better. That happens a lot sometimes. The advantage didn't do anything for you. So, you know, I feel like in D&D, if they really wanted to make the game like pop for a lot of people, they should just make the game easier, like numbers wise, because I hate trying to play as a character who's supposed to be really good in combat and then rolling like garbage 3 times in a row. And I hate when people are like, that's just how luck works. It's like, yeah, but that's not how a fight works. If you're really good, like actually at fighting, you're only missing enemies who are equally as good or hard to hit.
True. It's one of the sliding scale bit of the D20 system is one of the things that gets me, because it's the element where I see, especially with I think more inexperienced GMs with combat, like combat encounters, where it's the idea of, yeah, the players have so much action economy, therefore if ACs and all that are actually quite high, it'll be fine. And all the players, they have just, a 30% chance of hitting. This will feel good. Like, no, it doesn't. Another element I'll give, it's something I actually convinced my GM a good while ago to do, because I thought it was a decent idea. He agreed, and it's actually done really well for our game. For anybody that's possibly, for whatever reason, in our stream is going to run fucking D&D, if you want to make your players feel a lot better, implement leveled expertise. Just give them levels where they get expertise.
Yeah,
because like it just fucking fixes it. There are classes that give them expertise. Just slap another one. I think the levels he gave, it was like 3 and 12 or something. Like, you get to pick one skill that you mark as having expertise at those levels. And classes like Bard and Rogue, they get just extras. They just get more. So that way, everybody has a skill that they are just better at. They will just consistently do better with. Therefore, when they make those checks, it feels better because they're more consistent with it. Because it just works. It just feels better. And you know what? It doesn't break the game. It just makes people have more fun and it feels better.
Yeah. And I mean, like, one thing that happens in D&D all the time that I absolutely hate is, hey, DM, can I roll for that too? Okay. Barbarian rolls better on Arcana than the Wizard, because the difference between them is so minuscule that it's like, it's a 4+4 difference, which, isn't small, but it's definitely not big enough to make the Wizard reliably roll better than the Barbarian, who we might even have a -1. Where, like, in Pathfinder, starting out, if you're not trained at all, you just you just can't roll well. period.
Yeah, I'll
There's just
say it's like that is a problem that is fixed with the expertise solution, at least. Because like that can't
yeah.
happen now in the games I'm in because we're too high level because we're like level 14. Uh and also like the wizard having a expertise in arcana with like a with a 22 intelligence. Uh it's impossible for anybody to get as high as the wizards when they roll arcana because like they have expertise in it and they have a higher stat, and like just in the same way it's impossible for anybody to roll as good as me on performance because I have a plus 17 to my performance check. um but it's like at low levels 100%. It's very weird.
The last person we talked to was Michael Sayer, not Luis. If that's what you're referring to. Mention having more than just 4 degrees of success. Think that would work very well for having stuff like partial successes on attacks and the like. I mean, yeah, I actually agree with that statement. I think, like, personally, I think another way to really make games feel better is having like a threshold where you didn't hit a success but you get like a partial success. Like, imagine in D&D, right, if you rolled 2 under, you still did like just weapon damage,
Yeah.
you know, especially in D&D specifically, considering that they don't roll extra dice like they do in Pathfinder. I think that would be something that would actually enhance the experience because it reduces the fail thresholds, at least in players' mind. Like, players always want to be making success, and failing forward is something that a lot of like D20 games in general do very terribly. And so something like
That's
that
my hurdle.
would do very, yeah, honestly, like, it's something I get frustrated with. We're playing low level Kingmaker right now, in Pathfinder 2nd edition. My fiance is running the game, and man, I just feel really annoyed when I roll very terribly because we're just not at the level yet where proficiency is making a big difference. And it gets better. In Pathfinder, it definitely gets better. I just wish it was less egregious early game.
You know, it's like that's the part I'm gonna be excited about, but also not looking forward to. Just like playing low level Pathfinder again, like level 1, level 2 Pathfinder. Though I'm also excited for when we start a Plague Watch, because like I talked to Devin about this, but you know what I've been doing, just as I've been going to bed in these past week or two, I've been spending time on Path Builder.
Oh, see,
I've been
this is the
making
only game you do
builds.
it with too. It's so
I
crazy.
know. I made my fletchling fighter. I fleshed him out a lot more, and I have a character that is now a character concept. Let's see, I gotta just make sure I get the name specifically right. Just pull it up real quick. He is the as I put it, the unwilling avatar of Zon Cathan. As he is a fletchling, and you know fletchlings living in the shadow plane or whatever it's called in Pathfinder. I forget.
Yeah. They recently changed it because of
Yeah,
OGL stuff.
yeah, I forget the new name for it. That's what
I
it
do
is.
too.
But Zon Cathan, that's kind of his domain, and Fletchling's lore is really interesting in the fact that it's kind of like multiple-sided refugees of humans that ran away to that plane and also are kind of escaping because of Zon Cathan, because he's horrifying. And a character that's like running away from this horrifying deity, getting revenge on a noble family that is quite fucked up and ruined his life, and is now gaining the attention of the deity he's trying to escape from. And then I have a lizard folk gunslinger, a sniper who reverse engineered a sniper rifle after he picked it off of a corpse while trying to look for scrap metal.
Yeah. The worst part about Plague Watch is the idea. The idea behind it was we were doing the children's campaign entrance, which is you go through You play a random schmuck. They
Yeah.
survive, then you make your character. But literally everyone has been making characters, being like, "Oh man, this would be great to play in Plague Watch."
These are just in general, but like I still want to do the children's game because in case I have better characters. Though the only character I have so far that I've built out that I think would work for Plague Watch is this lizard folk sniper. I think he's the only one that would work because I think he's the only one that'd be fitted for like the after state of the apocalypse.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, it's not a full
Not an
apocalypse.
apocalypse. Like he's better built for like the where the world is currently.
Yeah.
The fletchling guy is only suited for like current Galarian.
Yeah, that's fair. You were I don't think you were there. No, you weren't, obviously, because it was during Kingmaker. So something I'm planning to do, and all y'all here who get a little bit of a slight heads up, what I'm planning on doing is, because the channel's been doing really well recently, and I feel like moving forward the channel is only going to be doing better and better. What I think we'll do is when we end this season of Riptide, which should be the end of Riptide, everything goes accordingly, we'll, before we play Mutants and Masterminds, we'll actually go through and make our characters for Plague Watch. And then I'm going to be spending the months that we're playing Mutants and Masterminds buying art for all the characters for Plague Watch.
Oh shit.
Because I'm getting like 150 plus a month on YouTube with ad rev.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's in the 3 months time about that we're doing it, I should be able to get art for 6 players.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool. I also fully intend I'm gonna try my damnedest. This Plague Watch character, I wanna have like I wanna bring my A game. So I'm gonna try to go crazy on this one.
I definitely think that as much as I like Riptide and what we've done with it so far, I feel like once Riptide ends and we start Plague Watch, we're gonna have a much better run, because I feel like a lot of the players have just gotten better since we started Riptide all that time ago.
Also, I wanna play around in a game that is purely yours in your setting that you're working on, and to
Yeah.
hit the same notes that we did in Anima, because like that's one of the things about Anima that hits as well, because it's like this is gonna be a world that you're creating.
Yeah, I
Which
think
is what I
that will
wanna
make a
hit.
difference too.
It really will.
So that's something.
Art for 6 players. Quick, make a summoner.
Everyone make a summoner. Ah, see, that's
Yes.
the thing. They need to survive the summoner exit.
Oh god. You know, in that case, if for some reason I play a summoner and I as someone who's also making roughly that much from YouTube, I would pitch in for the extra commission cost. I got you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I also want to do a better layout than we've been doing for our stream in general. And you know, I want to kind of go a little balls out, because I started a Patreon. For people here who don't know, I have a Patreon. I don't know if I put it in the description here. I don't think I have yet. I have not. I need to.
Also not in the description of your YouTube channel, by the way.
Oh, I should do that on the YouTube channel too. I totally forgot about that.
It's not linked on it.
I should do that. And one of the things I wanted to do was to, one, start cutting down our live plays to make them more, you know, viewable. But two, to start like improving them. I'm currently working on my cinematic build. I have a really good idea. The hard part is just like, I just want to do more. I'm like trying to gussy it up, and I'm just kind of being a perfectionist about it because I want it to be good, but it's taking a lot of time and I'm just busy. But yeah, so we're gonna have some art. We're gonna go a little bit more ham. I feel like Plague Watch is gonna be really good, maybe too good. I feel like at the end of the first season, the players might be a little hesitant to like play a different game for 2-3 months. So we'll have to see. Maybe the first season will be a little longer. I don't know. We'll see how we're feeling. But oh, Yes. Dead Phoenix did say something earlier though that I really like. We have 20 sides on the die. It should not be a binary system. Yes, I agree. It's one of the reasons why I dislike how Anima runs, because Anima is like a D100 system, but the only thing that matters is the tens places. So it really is a D10 system, which is more math.
Basically.
But yeah, for sure there is, and that's something that like I think D I think D&D 5e can really take inspiration from, is just let players fail forward more often, let players make progress more often, you know. That's I think what they should do more than anything, is of course also try to at least balance the game somewhat. I know they can do it. Oyman just said here earlier, I would say subclass design in 5e is so scattershot. Yeah. Why did Blade Singer Wizard get the substitute and attack for a cantrip ability, while Eldritch Knight Fighter only got that in one D&D? And that it there's so many, like, Blade Singer is a very strong subclass and is almost non-contestable compared to some of the other wizard subclasses, because honestly, like, being a transmuter wizard is really cool in story and kind of lame mechanically speaking. And depending on how you're multi-classing, you might not even get the actual thing that makes transmuter wizard good, which is the alchemist stone or whatever that lets you bring a player back to life.
Mm.
So yeah, I think they need to up the power in a lot of things. I mean, heck, just start making more classes hit like a paladin does.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's the design philosophy I enjoy a lot more of, like, you have a couple options that your players are doing. Maybe instead of nerfing the couple things everyone is picking, what if you uplift more things? Uplift others to be like the most picked. Maybe. I know that Paladin is just kind of overpowered. I get it. But, like, what if you just made the other options more fun?
yeah. I mean, so many subclasses could use an upgrade. Ranger, my god, needs an update. Oh my goodness. They
Yeah,
made it better
just
in Tasha's.
give something that stops the endless fucking, like, talks of, like, if you want to play a ranger, just play a fighter with a bow.
Yeah.
Just, like,
Which is not
I
what Rangers are
understand.
anyway, but
No, it's like a battlefield controller thing. That's like the point of ranger. Isn't like
kind of.
it's like a caster thing. You have a lot of, like, really cool abilities as a ranger. Especially, actually, Horizon Walker is actually, or Gloomstalker.
Gloomstalker is very good, yeah.
Gloomstalker is very cool. Um, but, like, it's just inherently there's just weird issues. Though Baldur's Gate 3, I think, translated Ranger really well.
Yeah.
It made Ranger very cool because they fixed the issue of fucking favored terrain and favored enemy. They just made it usable in a game sense, because, like, it solved the problem of, like, you have, like, all right, I picked my favorite enemy, my favorite terrain. Now I gotta talk with my GM and make sure that they actually include my shit, or I'm building a character for the area we're going to be going into and not deviating too much.
But, you know, like, there's potential in D&D 5e. They, for sure, could make the game better. I don't like how Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford talk about the game. I feel like the game is just doomed. And so if we're talking, like, bad takes in Tabletop, their takes on tabletop design is egregiously bad.
And yeah, you can have some complexity in your game. Like, it's okay.
And the thing is, I'm done deluding myself. I used to be like, no, it's Wizards of the Coast that tell them they can or can't do something. Maybe that was at one point.
I said the same thing.
Maybe that was at one point. Maybe their brains have just been rotted. Maybe they're still talking on scripts in their interviews. But legitimately, when The only thing that players have been asking for since the beginning is just make classes good. I feel like it's a design problem because no one, like, them over here going, we can't change things outside of D&D, people don't like it. Not a single person's gonna bitch if you fix Beastmaster. Not a single person is gonna complain if you fix Monk.
Honestly, like, I also am like thinking of we can't add more classes because then it'll be repetitive and all that. You design classes that are interesting, but it'll add the choice paralysis. Well, that's in your core book. What if you have an extra supplemental book that's the one where the extra classes are in? Okay, then you
Like
just give the core book to the
Xanathar's
new player.
Guide?
Yes, that's the book you give to the players who playing the game for a while. It's almost like that's a thing you've been doing.
Been doing. They did it once, and they're like, we're good. Nothing but campaign books for the next 5 years. The sheer... I can't find a word for how disappointed I am in them. The sheer disappointment I am in a company making a TTRPG game that, since its inception, released... did Xanathar's actually have new classes in it?
No, I had new subclass.
One new class in like 7 years.
Yeah, the only new class was in the Eberron book, and then was reprinted in Tasha.
Was that Artificer?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
That's literally the only new class that has ever been released.
One new class in like 7 years, 8 years. I don't even know how long. It's been a long time now.
It's almost been a decade, if not a decade.
Is egregious. Is way too upsetting.
July 15th, 2014 was the publishing date of the D&D
9 years, almost 10 years. They haven't. It's not even a choice paralysis thing at that point. It's literally, they think that their current player base can't handle a new class, right? Is that the thought?
Yeah. The new players can't do it. The new players will.
Yeah, I'm not talking the new players. I'm talking about the current players.
The current players will be faced with the situation where the battlefield roles will be too repetitive because, like, what's the mechanical difference between a barbarian and a fighter? That's what Chris Perkins.
No, it's not even the mechanical rules. It's what's the contextual difference between a barbarian and a fighter to someone who doesn't know what a barbarian is. And
yeah, but he was also saying like further there. That was the snippet, but he was saying furthermore, like, which is goofier, is like, why couldn't barbarian just be a fighter subclass, which is stupid. But he was saying also that he was saying we have enough battlefield roles. Like, if you want to play support, you can play a druid, cleric, or paladin. If you want to play a DPS, you can play a fighter or a barbarian. Like, if we add more, it's going to be too much repetition. That's what his point was, of like, we don't need more classes. In fact, we can cut them if I was redesigning D&D.
And that's so dumb.
Yes.
Because literally, but what if they just do it but differently? Also, yes. Fighter and barbarian literally fight differently. Barbarian goes in, and I mean, let's just cut the chaff, shall we? Every barbarian should just have the bear totem effect all the time.
Yes. Literally.
Just make them what people want it to be, which is the tank. Let them go in, soak up tons of damage, and be good. Because you know what? That's what they are good at. They go in, hit big. No one plays barbarian and fighter the same in D&D. That's such a joke. Hell, no one plays even like wizard and sorcerer the same, in all honesty. Mostly because wizards are like the split spell, you know, whatever that the meta magic they have is.
That's wizard. That's sorcerers.
Yeah, I said sorcerer.
I think so. Wizard.
No, sorcerer does
Wizard.
that.
Yeah,
Wizard,
wizard have like the like much more spell options and have
yeah,
more spell slots, and like they have some extra abilities. And then the sorcerers have less spell options, but they can actually adjust it, and they know how to talk to women. That's what their advantages are.
yeah. Obviously, Wizards of the Coast. We know wizards are virgins and
Yeah,
sorcerers fuck.
exactly.
You know,
Charisma caster.
what do you need to explain?
Yeah. We get that immediately. You're a wizard.
We understand.
Charisma and strength are your dump stat.
Everyone knows sorcerers fuck. Come on. Why do you think the whole thing is their bloodline?
Your whole thing's your bloodline, and are you telling me that you have a 20 in your charisma and you don't fuck?
Exactly. I mean, like, that's a clip right there.
Yeah. That's up to you to clip that.
I should clip that for sure. That's a really good one. But yeah, and the thing is, like, the more idiotic part of this take is anything is the idea that a player needs prior context to understand a class, because literally you could make a Boingo Mancer and no one's gonna know what that is, but as long as you explain what that Boingo Mancer does in game, you've thus created the context for people to understand. When people play a new TTRPG like Daggerheart and they're like, oh, what's a Seraphim? Right? No one looked at Seraphim and was like, I'm not gonna play this. I don't know what a fucking Seraphim is. They looked at what it did and they're like, this is cool.
Yeah, my first response when I open up a core book, I open up the class section. I see there's a new thing. It's called Sentinel. I immediately start like hyperventilating in panic because I don't know what it means. I see the art. I start crying and I close the book.
I close the book. I'll see this in my nightmares.
I go back to 5e. No, it's if you want to immediately fix the problem for new players, you know what you do? You have a nice splash page with a nice piece of art, some flavor text in like a small little blurb telling me what it means, and then my brain will go, that seems cool. Or alternatively, my brain will go, oh, that's I guess. I don't know if I'll do that. And I turn to the next page, and then I have this, and then I repeat the process repeatedly until I see a character, and I'm like, oh, I want to play that. That's what happens. It's so easy because I know how to read.
Right. It's so...
Alternatively, if it's another game that I'm being introduced to my friends, because my friends know me and I'm good friends with them, they might even say, hello, Alex. I know your playstyle. Look at these pages. I've opened them for you. And then I look and I'm like, oh, you know me so well. Because they do know me so well. That's happened a few times.
Yeah. I don't know. That's like, we talked about the Brendan Lee Mulligan thing earlier.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, we're talking, I think what's lost here is the context of what's actually being talked about here.
Yeah, it's more of he's responding to a take other people have that he disagrees with.
I think he could have worded his analogy better. I think he could have definitely done it better. But at the end of the day, at the very least, I can see where he's coming from. When it comes to Chris Perkins, and I'm sure things Jeremy Crawford has said in the past as well, I cannot in good conscience like side with them in literally anything, because none of their design choices seems like it's for the benefit of the players actually, and seems more like it's this weird survey entity that they keep asking questions to, that keeps giving them like riddles and clues to what players want, that they keep misinterpreting. Because yeah, of course, whenever you design something that sucks, people are going to dislike it. It's not that people don't want shit that doesn't belong in D&D. It's that the things you design outside of the context of how D&D works are garbage. So, you know, I think your head is screwed on a little too loose there. Like, I may be being a little aggressive. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. I know that there are definitely very wonderful people who work at WotC, but this none of that shows. None of that shows in how they're designing the game or what they're doing for their player base. The fact that they refuse to release new classes, the fact that they refuse to fix their classes, and they release a book with optional rules to fix their classes, and I think even more egregiously than anything, the fact that the majority of the books that they put out are mostly just settings and like adventure paths. And to be fair, Pathfinder, you could say that the majority of the stuff they put out is similar, but in the adventure paths and a bunch of other stuff, there's new archetypes, sometimes new ancestries, and they also release actual like world guide things so that you could play in the setting that they designed better. And that doesn't show up in D&D whatsoever. The Sword Coast is literally the only thing that ever gets talked about. The only time they release new books around any kind of setting stuff, guess what? It's on the Sword Coast.
Yeah. And like the new like 1 to 2 classes, I feel like on the surface might not even sound like a lot, but these classes are significantly chunky. There's a lot to play around with. And these are classes that interact with a lot of like rules when it comes to ancestries, with archetypes. There's a lot to play around with just the fact that you added in 2 classes, each usually coming in with like maybe like 3, 4, 5 sometimes like subclasses, or like at least little versions of their class. And like there's a lot coming into what Pathfinder operates in. And then with the other books, just even if it's an adventure path, I know that there's going to be something. There's something that I could get out of it, which is very fun.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
and not only that,
D&D, what can I get? Homebrew? That's it.
As people who have been saying a lot lately, the Artificer, mechanically, a half-caster, kind of weird class, doesn't make a lot of sense, really, honestly, play-wise. At least in Pathfinder, literally every new class that comes out is like, hey guys, here's a whole new mechanic you can play the game. You know, I'm playing a thaumaturge.
Of course the Artificer wouldn't make sense. They added a crafter in a game where crafting rules don't exist.
It's like, I'm playing a thaumaturge, right? Yeah, sure, I'm technically a martial character, but I have recall knowledge as like a part of my kit, and my whole function is exploiting enemy weaknesses or creating them where they don't exist, which is super cool, very interesting.
It's a great concept. Like for a class, I love it.
And you'll be like, well, Rangers can do a bunch of recall knowledge and be like the hunter type too. So, but Ranger doesn't get the cool things to affect weaknesses or create weaknesses in people. They're just 2 different classes. Imagine saying Animus could be Oracle and Exemplar could be a fighter. Yeah, though some people have said that about Gunslinger. Yeah, but see, Gunslinger, base level Gunslinger, not including feats, yeah, is kind of fighter-esque, only a little worse because it's only guns that you're really good with and not everything.
Mm-hmm.
But Gunslinger feats are really cool and do some really, really fun things. And honestly,
they have some fun stuff.
Their reloads and everything are also really cool. Like
reloads that make using guns just a lot easier
and more fun, more interesting.
Yeah. The sniper stuff is really interesting. I love just like looking at it because that's the one I was building. I was trying to work with this like gunslinger character, and I built out this like chameleon sniper. It's really fun, but my initial draft was a pistolero with the frilled intimidation, like lizard folk. It didn't fully work out because like this isn't working for the character concept, but like I got the chameleon lizard that can like scamper around, blend into the environment, and then just a gunshot comes out from nowhere. And also Scout, because Scout is a really cool archetype.
So again, we're ending another string because we're past time.
We are
saying D&D bad, Pathfinder good.
Yeah,
we keep coming back. We were so good for so long. We didn't talk about it for a really long time, and now we're just back here again. We've gone nowhere in like the 2 years we've been doing this.
Yeah, we keep doing it.
And it's like, you know, I don't want to bash on D&D. I really don't. I think D&D does offer some fun for the people who enjoy it. And I definitely see the charms, and I see, like, when I first started playing D&D, there's like, this is very interesting. This is not how tabletop games are, you know. But the more you dug into it, the more you just found that it's just shallow. It's not a lot. It's not that deep. Uh, and a lot of the fun parts about the game is just really like, it's really about how you can break the game.
Mm.
Because honestly,
And
people only talk about how they break the game or how the DM let them break the game.
yeah, and a lot of my critiques always come down to the fact where it's like base D&D is a fucking snooze fest, and D&D is a game that you have to rely on your GM to basically create another game to basically work, because I'm in a game that's like that, where my
Yeah.
GM has done an insane amount of work to like make this game really fun, and even then it still rubs some elements where I'm like 5e and I shake my fist in the air.
5e, we could be playing Pathfinder. I know Q has several times said, you know, like, I would think about doing Pathfinder. He says
If he ever
more and more often.
if he ever shifts, I would be right there with him. Like I would totally, and I think he'd probably get more out of it. But like just knowing him, I think he would. I think he'd have a better time. But like it's just he's put a lot of work into Pathfinder, or into 5e.
Oh my
like
God.
basically creating Pathfinder is like what he's been kind of doing.
Oh my God. Brain blast. Holy shit, that's an epiphany of epiphanies right there. I totally understand why people never want, you know, how we talked a while ago about why people don't want to swap off D&D because they just don't want to learn a new game.
Yeah.
It's not because people don't want to learn a new game. It's because D&D DMs have been spending so much time crafting their own game.
It's sunk cost fallacy. Yeah.
Not even sunk cost fallacy. The thing is they made their game, their own game with D&D. And so it's like, why would you want to play another game that isn't the one that is your personal baby? It feels like, you know, like, yeah, sure, it's a baby grafted on top of a skeleton of another baby, but like, still, I feel like I've had an epiphany. I understand now. People don't want to swap off D&D purely because it's their own game that they've crafted themselves, that they made specifically to fit them and their needs. And when you put so much time into crafting something perfectly for yourself, it's like, why would I play something else that doesn't have my own touch and I'm not as familiar with, when I know that this here works because I made it work because I brute forced it? They've invested so much time into crafting their own unique game. They pretty much made don't quote that. Don't quote that.
Quote that. Quote someone else clip that. Use it against him.
That it's like they made their own game. They invented their own TTRPG essentially. And so it's like, of course it's their perfect game. They made it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the amount
oh my God.
The amount of work specifically Q has put in is like, I can, like, if he switches to Pathfinder, I think he get a lot out of it, but there's just a lot that, like, if he tried to switch our game to it, there'd be a lot of power stuff that'd be lost, because like we have certain stuff that we can do, like these special powers we've all been given, these really cool abilities we all have. I have like some really fucking dope bard abilities that's like can't be replicated or like ported into Pathfinder really easily. And it's like, so it'd basically be like, it'd be a complete wipe of all of that. And like that'd be a big jump. So it'd be like whenever this game ends, he'd have to do that. Or it'd be a big conversation of like, we can switch to a better game. However, we'd give up like all of this. I would not be against, but I'd also then have to be like, you know what, maybe I do. Maybe that'll be my project after the stream ends and I rest my voice for a bit. Maybe I'll remake Eric Faulkner, my D&D character in Pathfinder. Which I've never built a bard before. I actually very unfamiliar, except with Suzanne's character on how bards
I
work.
I thoroughly love Bard and Pathfinder. They're actually super cool.
It
Uh,
seemed cool.
but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely not the forever campaign kind of person. I think like a story needs an
Me neither.
end, and it seems like Q just wants to run a forever story. And I think it would behoove y'all to, at this point at the very least, consider moving towards it end so that
The game in particular is like it seems like it's a lot more basically a loot like a more structured what's the word for it what's that type
sandbox.
of no what's the type it is a sandbox, what's the type of game where people kind of like shift around all the time, like players jump in and out, uh there's like a word for it. West March, because like
Oh, West March
it's
game.
like that because like players like will join in, be there for like a good like couple of years and then leave. Because I'm actually like this is gonna be my last year in the game,
Oh,
and so I'm gonna wrap up like my character's story and then leave because I can't. I'm like I've been this is gonna be like my fucking fourth year going
yeah,
on of the game, and I'm like I've
crazy.
been like I'm like I gotta end this character's story because I'm like this game is great, but I'm gonna lose my mind if I go on for 5 years. I need my Friday night like back. And like I also just like I can't have a game go on forever.
Yeah, I
And then
just
the only other thing that dragged me away earlier is like if a new job forces me to like have better availability.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I get that. Also, I don't know how you can play D&D for that long after playing as much Pathfinder as we've done. Uh,
Good group.
yeah, it has
That's
to
it.
be. But anyway, like I said, we're past time. Sorry, I had a brain blast at the last second where it's like, oh my god, I understand everything now. I understand why uh, GMs don't want to swap out a D&D. And honestly, like, in all honesty, even though I definitely know some players who were also didn't want to swap games, I know Vale definitely didn't want to swap to Pathfinder for a while. Uh, a majority of players really don't care that much about it as long as they get to have a good game. And
Mm.
trying something new is very interesting. Maybe it's just intimidating because a game can seem like a lot, which I'm sure is the big effect Pathfinder has on some people.
It can. I think that one of the ways to get around it genuinely, even if it like doesn't feel as good for people who are more used to it, is just have newer players start out at level 1 Pathfinder. Just have like a slower leveling game because just
Yeah,
starting out with just like picking some small feats and just be like, okay, have an idea of what your character is, maybe plan out like up to like level 3, just don't worry about higher up. Just don't worry about it. I think it's just keep it small because like that just will make it less overwhelming.
yeah. But that's gonna be it for us. Anything you want to leave with before we head out?
Yeah, if you're interested in lore content instead of just pure tabletop content, I do that too all as well. Go check out my channel, Glue Boy. It's linked in Cam's channel, and also just type that into YouTube. Today I put out a video. It's a little weird, a little short, but primarily it is about the Tyranids. So if you're interested in that, you can go watch that. But I do lore content on Warhammer 40k, Vampire the Masquerade. I got some Lancer lore videos. I got some overview on like other stuff, so it's pretty fun. But yeah, I got videos coming out as my voice permits me, and I have a big crossover, another collab video thing I'm working on that should be out probably in a week or two. I have a lot of recording next week to do.
I feel that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why I'm resting my voice so much.
Also, I don't think we've done it on this channel, but congrats on 3K. It's been a month I think since you hit 3K.
It has. It's been since the collab with Mr. Bones 40k. That was the thing that kind of tipped me over.
So congrats. You've been making some pretty good progress, and a lot of your videos recently have been doing pretty good too. I like the time traveling plague one has been doing pretty good. So
Def Guard is in. It's just kind of a win button because I was like,
yeah,
my typhus consistently does well. What if I did another Nurgle one and then it did really well? I was like, I see.
As for me, I mean, you know where to find my content, of course. The Lancer contest build will be out. I'll probably not release it tonight. I'll probably just end up releasing it early tomorrow, and then I'll just do a Saturday video. But that will be coming out. Hopefully, no more cat vomiting, no more random events happening in my house. It's pulling me away from editing. It's a really cool video. I don't know how long it is because I had to like keep researching things as I was talking about it. Because honestly, like, I don't even think a script would have been good. Honestly, there's just so much. It would have taken me forever to write a perfect script for it. But it's very interesting. The builds are really cool, and being able to actually sit down and like research them for hours, like I did today, definitely gave me a lot more context. So that's really cool. Also, be on the lookout. My top 5 monsters from Monster Core coming out soon on the channel, probably Saturday. So be on the lookout for that. And maybe, if all things go accordingly, we might have a guest next week. Very cool. Very excited. Yeah. And next month, we have the Tianxia books, the character guide and the world guide coming out. So expect videos on those 2 books. We got a lot of cool Pathfinder stuff. I know my Pathfinder, ever since my Dragon video came out, my Dragon video has been killing it lately. I think it's at almost 7,000 views. I just released it it is at 7,000 views. I just released it a little over a week ago. That video surprisingly killed it. So I know my viewer base is really hungry for some Pathfinder content. It's coming, I promise. The beginning of the year was just really slow. But anyway, that's going to be it for us. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll say goodnight.
Good night.
Good night.